Here. Hello, everybody. Oz, I need a screen share possibility. Is that okay? While I'm setting up, I just invite you to rest your eyes.
Yeah, you have that. You can just start.
Okay.
It's ready to go. So when you're ready, Meg, you can.
I invite you to rest your eyes and think of a place on Sonoma Mountain or a view of Sonoma Mountain that you really love, and I will share my screen. Okay, so everyone in Glen Ellen is at the base of Sonoma Mountain or slightly up if you live up higher. So it's really our world. And the mountain was originally the territory of the Pomo, the Wapo, and the Miwok, along with a lot of other tribes who gathered at Tole Lake for healing ceremonies. So the mountain has carried us for a long time and given to us in lots of ways. I'm first going to just go through some pictures, and I apologize, my PowerPoint has decided not to play slideshows, so I'm going to have to do this by hand. Anyway, this is a view of the mountain from on high, looking toward Mount Tam over here. This is the grasslands looking from the Petaluma side. You can see how different it is with all the cattle ranching on the west side and the forest on the east side. We have these beautiful walks, grasslands hiking, amazing views. This is just right in the middle there is Mt Diablo far in the distance. A closer view of Mt Diablo in San Pablo Bay, Mount St. Helena from the Ridge Trail, Mount Tam from the East Slope Trail, and of course the wildlands at Eldridge and SDC. On the west side, some of you may not have been here. This land was originally, I think it belonged to the Ross family. They gave it to maybe the Nature Conservancy, and then Sonoma State has it now. So Fairfield Osborne is a research station on the west side that connects almost with the top of the mountain. There's two beautiful lakes, and it's really a wonderful place to go. When things open up again, every Saturday they have free hikes, and they have a lot of other cool stuff going on. It's very interesting because the ecology on the west side is slightly different than here. And of course, our lovely grandmother Redwood, whom we all love. So Sonoma Mountain is really part of the Sonoma Mountains. In the south here, Wildcat Mountain, here we are in the middle, and in the north, Taylor Mountain and Bennett Ridge. And we're surrounded by 250,000 people. So we're really the anchor for the whole South Bay of Sonoma, the whole south part of Sonoma County. Sonoma Mountain Preservation has been advocating for open space and scenic preservation for 30 years now. And our mission is to preserve the scenic, agricultural, and natural resources by cultivating a sense of place, engaging people with the landscape, and inspiring them to become mountain stewards. This is a list of the recreational opportunities and trails that we work with. North Sonoma Mountain Regional Park, which some of you probably know is the ongoing development of it and possible camping is up for review. So there was a big comment period last fall. This was the most recent addition to the mountain trails, and the 4 miles of trails connect with Jack London State Park. The east slope of Sonoma Mountain connects with the Loop Trail at Jack London and has some of the most amazing views. If you can drag yourself all the way up and go along the Ridge Trail, it's really a wonderful hike, especially in the spring, because the lupin and poppies are very profuse. And of course, in Eldridge, the Sonoma Developmental Center is actually 725 more acres of wildlands and the wildlife corridor. A place you may not have heard of is Petaluma's Lafferty Park, 270 acres. It's the only open space on the west side beside Crane Creek. Petaluma, the city of Petaluma has owned Lafferty Park for 25 or 30 years, and it's been under litigation all that time. The litigation has finally been put aside, and the city is in the process of remaking the trails and getting it ready for access. It's quite a steep but very beautiful piece of land, and when you get to the top, you can see really far. So when they open, it's well worth going to. Oops, sorry. So I just wanted to mention, Sonoma Land Trust was the main instigator of the transfer of 800 acres from SDC, the orchard property basically, to Jack London in 2002. So we've had a long, intimate interest in SDC, and we continue to have that. So our current interest, of course, is to transfer the 725 acres as soon as possible. And it's, I think John McCall will talk about it a little more, but it's an incredibly frustrating thing. The open space is there, but the state doesn't want to hand it over. They think a developer should get it first. And we don't think that. We'd like to just get it preserved. So this is a map you can't see real well, but the lighter green lands are public ownership. The darker green lands are basically conservation easements and restricted access. And you see that this corridor along here is pretty new when the North Slope opens. So that's a long corridor. This is Fairfield Osborne here. And here's Lafferty. So of course, we always hope that somehow we can connect to the whole Ridge Trail. But it takes a long time to move properties along. And Sonoma Mountain Preservation tries to encourage constructive discussion, like the visual guidelines for Sonoma and Taylor Mountains. We just sent an email today. If you're interested in the guidelines of what people can build and not build so that you don't have to look at it, these are really important to know about. And if you're interested in getting the email, just put your email in the chat and I'll add you to the list. So we've been working in the most recent iteration with SDC since 2015. We were on the coalition for all those years and now have handed over more of the day-to-day stuff to people like Vicki and Tracy, but we keep our finger in the pie. And also have supported Lafferty since the 90s. So you can see that we have to work a very long time to make anything happen. So we have to have a lot of patience in this organization. So generally, you know, we represent the interests of the mountain whenever there's an appropriate time to speak at public and private agencies, and also the rights of nature. That may not be something everybody's familiar with, but the rights of nature are in the Ecuadorian Constitution and a few other constitutions around the world. It basically gives nature the same rights as humans have, so that we, instead of keeping humans on the top of everything, we have a more reciprocal relationship. Before the pandemic, we'd started doing experiential hikes, which were very popular. And the book that I'm sure most of you have heard about, Where the World Begins. And your two of the forum's esteemed members, Arthur and Tracy, who are here tonight, were some of the authors of this book. And I'll talk a little bit later about, oh, here it is. So this book talks about the whole ecology of the mountain, not just the geology and the plants, but the people and the history and the visionaries. 4 authors, 140 photographs, and 10 amazing maps, some of which I'll show you. So if you don't have a book and you want one, Talisman has some that are signed. Arthur has some at his office at Baseline. And the new Kenwood Press office has some, and Reader's Books in downtown Sonoma. You can also go on our website and sonomamountain.org if somebody can put that in the chat, and order them and get them sent anywhere. This is one of my favorite maps. The pink side, where we are, is the Sonoma Creek watershed. This green part is the Petaluma River watershed, and this gray part is the Russian River watershed. So this mountain feeds 3 watersheds, and you can see all these creeks. It's just, they run in every direction, and you know, feed the people on the flats, feed the fish, and it's a piece of the mountain that, speaking of water rights and sustainability, that I think is really important. This is a map of wildlife corridors. So this is the SDC corridor. This one goes north, and I'm told that this one is primarily for badgers, which I think is really interesting. And then of course the wildlife corridor goes here. And I know some of you have been involved with the Living with Lions project. Of course, our lions walk all around the mountain into our backyards, and it's really fun to visualize how the animals, the non-human beings, have pathways that are different from ours. Down here in the corner, you can see the mountain in relationship to the whole bay here. So I just wanted to briefly talk about our current focus. I mentioned the transfer of the 725 more acres. The SDC specific plan, which we're looking at carefully along with everybody else, and have been talking about once the specific plan is in place, setting up a watchdog, a local watchdogging organization of a few people who really pay attention to what's supposed to happen and what is happening. Because in this county, like in most others, if you're not watching, they do whatever they want. So, you know, in order to protect the integrity of Glen Ellen and the other communities, we really need to stay on top of it. When we can, safely, we'll start leading explorations of Eldridge SDC again. We had started that right before the pandemic, and it was really fun because lots of people didn't know about the buildings, or they didn't know about the open space. And so the more people see it, the more they engage with it. And of course, we're supporting the Lafferty Park process, hoping to offer experiential taste of the mountain, like Arthur led a few years ago through Land Paths, a 2-day overnight hike on the mountain, which is really interesting because there's no place you can sleep on the mountain right now unless you have a house there. And I just wanted to briefly mention, we have this dream of instituting a program for some grade of school kids all the way around the mountain, where they get to know the mountain and they write across the mountain to some other school kids so that they root themselves in an awareness of place and an awareness of the spatial relationship between, say, Petaluma and Sonoma, or Santa Rosa and SDC, you know, those kinds of cross mountain things that kids don't usually tune into. So Arthur has done a little bit of prototyping with this, and we're talking to a couple of organizations to work with 10 schools in the next year. And we would absolutely love, we just think it's such a neat idea that every single school would have some introduction to the mountain all the way around. Okay, just a brief PR. You can join us. You might get an email every 1 or 2 months. It's not very intense. You can buy the book. We have a Facebook page and sonomamountain.org with a bunch of history and maps and stuff. You can support us with a donation. Of course, we want you to get out on the mountain and hike, whether you're with us or alone. And be a volunteer. If you love to lead hikes, we'll be talking to you. If you want to be eyes for the mountain about the scenic guidelines or about SDC, talk to me or Arthur or Tracy. And I just want to end with one of the visits last winter. It must have been, yeah, I guess it was the winter. One of the visits we took on a guided trip of SDC. So we're all in the same boat here, wanting to preserve this beautiful place. And thanks for having me. I think I'm done. And I think John will talk more about SDC, but we'll all entertain questions at the end.
Okay, so you'd prefer that we wait on our questions until the other two?
Oh, I don't care. If somebody has a question now, that's fine.
Yeah, does anybody have a question for Meg out there? Go ahead and raise your hand or do one of the signaling things. You mentioned, Meg, about encouraging people to be mountain stewards. What does that look like? How do you suggest? What do you mean by that?
Good question. So most of us, I mean, lots of people hike on the mountain. And every time you go on a particular walk, you're noticing, you know, this is a patch of Fernald's iris that grows every year in the same place, or this is where I can see Calochortus, or, you know, this is the tree that fell down 10 years ago and now it's rotting to the ground. So part of being a mountain steward is just making a relationship with the place you live and the place you love. Part of it in the context of the development that's going to be happening at SDC is to take what energy you have to help that process be as viable for the humans and the animals and the open space as is possible. Being a mountain steward might mean leading a specialized hike. One of our members led a hike on birding through sound, for example. We were going to have a hike on the, you know, looking at the minutia. What does it look like to explore the little creatures? So if you have some expertise or love, we're kind of open to anything. We don't have a big, you know, it's not that we don't have standards, but you know what I mean. We invite all kinds of interesting, curious possibilities. And we don't, you know, we're a small, totally not volunteer organization, so we don't have any stewardship days like some of the other bigger organizations do. But it may be at some point in SDC's future that we do some of that. I don't know. Certainly at Jack London, of course, which Matt will talk about in a minute, there's lots of stewarding opportunities. And I know there's people who work with Jack London and they walk the mountain every day. So I don't know, I hope that answers your question. There's lots of possibilities.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Do we have other questions for Meg at this time? I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment.
Yeah, Rebecca C. has her hand up.
Okay, Rebecca, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Nick. Meg, thank you very much for your presentation. I was just wondering if you could comment on, you know, as you mentioned, the love of Sonoma Mountain and the stewardship in regards to your position, not your position, but Sonoma Mountain's preservation position in regards to overnight stays and any camping or campfires that they're proposing by the regional parks right now in the master plan.
Thank you for that question, Rebecca. We sent in extensive comments. We don't have an institutional, we don't have a clear institutional response. Some of us are really opposed to any campfires, even at the place, you know, near the parking lots. And some of us think, oh, maybe it would be okay if it was monitored by, you know, they're talking about at the top of the mountain where you could stay in the cabins, but it would always be a guided kind of thing. You couldn't just go there as a family. Personally, I'm very ambivalent because I hate to see it as a choice between access and fires. And I hope we can find some kind of viable compromise. But there's lots of people who don't have access to very much open space who would love to be on the mountain. And they've been talking about making some camping for a long time. They've had camping at Sugarloaf for many, many years without problems. They have camping at Hood Mountain before it burned. Terry Shore said that the campsite was pretty bad, you know, not very taken care of, but it is possible to have people camping and to have safe fires. So I'm not giving you a definitive answer. I'm just talking about the all the variables that are involved with it. So I hope that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
And can you just clarify in regards to the wildlife corridor, that aspect of development, and if there is camping?
Ask that question in a different way. I'm not sure what you mean.
Do you think that having more people like overnight stays when you have mountain lions and bobcats going through Sonoma Mountain, do you think that would be an interruption of wildlife?
No, because those animals go wherever they want. I mean, bears walk in Sugarloaf all the time. Mountain lions have walked through my house, you know, my land, and I didn't know it. So they're not really interested in interacting with us. What's more of a threat is many, many houses and lighting at SDC, because that is definitely a corridor crossing. That's much more of a threat than a few people camping.
Wow, great question, Rebecca. Do we have more questions for Meg at this time? I am not seeing any hands for questions. Hey, Meg, thank you. That was a great presentation. I'm just thrilled at what I heard, and I might be giving you a phone call sometime in the future, and we'll talk about some of the things you mentioned.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see all of you.
Thank you again, Meg. All right. Well, let's continue on with our Sonoma Mountain extravaganza with our ally from Jack London Park Partners. Matt Leffert is Executive Director of Jack London Park Partners. Matt, what's going on, man?
Hey there. Hi, everybody. I don't know a lot of you. I see a couple of friends. I see my friend Maud, and I see Jay. But for those of you I don't know, hello, I've been Executive Director here at Jack London for a little over a year now. And Meg, wonderful presentation, by the way. Last I saw you, we went on a short walk together before the world fell apart. But here we are, and the world seems to be coming together. I'm going to share a quick presentation with you all. And let's see here. Get this slideshow going. I hope you can all see that.
Yes.
And I apologize if I get stuck or if I cut out. This is a wonderful park and so many terrific assets, both cultural and natural. Broadband and Wi-Fi are not among our cherished assets here. So, but I'll make that trade any day. This is a really beautiful view from the park here. Quickly, here's our mission. For those of you who don't know, Jack London Park Partners operates Jack London State Historic Park in partnership with California State Parks. And that has been the case since 2012. We're among 5 or so nonprofit operators of state parks. And the Bay Area district is actually rich in nonprofit operators for an unfortunate reason, and that's that there were a few state parks here after the state park financial crisis in 2011, 2012. Of course, our good friends at Sonoma Ecology Center are part of Team Sugarloaf and operate Sugarloaf. China Camp in Marin County is also operated by a nonprofit partner. And then the folks at the Stewards of Coast and Redwoods have been in a blend operating partnership for quite a while over at Armstrong and Austin Creek area. So, you know, I mentioned that this was not the year that I expected, and we do a lot of really terrific programming here. And we had a pivot this year, and we felt it was really important to maintain a really strong connection to our community and to make the mountain available to folks. And so we did some virtual programming, and we've actually continued that because it's worked really well. And one of the things that I think that many of us experienced in the pandemic was a real need to connect with nature and to pay attention to our own wellness. And we started a series called Take 5 with Jack, and our education manager went out to a different spot and talked about themes. For those of you who are familiar with forest bathing, a lot of those same things is about really connecting and taking some time to address mental health. And of course, there's a lot of data that really supports how being out in nature is really good for physical and mental health. And so we started this series. We invite people to come to take a few minutes, watch them on YouTube, and then come to the park and experience the real thing. So that has gone really well for us, and we'll continue with that series because there are a lot of people that have mobility issues and can't get to the park. And so it's a really great way to share the park with those folks, or people who have lived here and moved away and want to reconnect, or people who will never get here. And so we just really have discovered a really wonderful program with these virtual series. And something else that we've been really working on is our environmental education program. We feel that it's really important, Meg brought this up too, to connect students to the environment and really ensuring that we are instilling the passion and the connection that our next generation of stewards who are really going to care for this place in the way that so many have before us, and why we have so much protected land. We really want that to continue. And so we have invested a lot in these programs. We're doing some curriculum with 6th and 7th graders here that's gone really well. In this past year, we've made a lot of lesson plans available to Valley public school teachers, created free lesson plans for them, and we'll continue with that partnership as well. Our volunteer program is probably the most essential component of our operation. We've got 275 volunteers. Without these volunteers, we operate so leanly. Without these volunteers, we really couldn't do what we do here at the park. Every Tuesday, we've got a group of really committed folks who are coming out and helping us with natural resource projects, doing the really tough work that in assisting our facilities and maintenance crews, and really putting in a lot of hours. We've got experienced arborists who come out and help us, and the service that they provide to us is just something that we couldn't afford. And in 2020, even with interrupted volunteer service, we had close to 7,000 hours of volunteer service here in the park. And you know, a quick calculation of that brings the value of that work well over 200,000, probably more when you consider the skilled labor and just other benefits of having volunteers here in the park. They also operate our kiosk. They help us operate our bookstore, and the cottage, which are now open, by the way. So I encourage you all to come if it's been a while since you've been to the park. You know, lots of downed trees every year in the park. And, you know, here's a great example of, I think this is a big Doug fir that came down across the trail here. And this may be either our ranch foreman or one of our volunteers helping us out. And again, clearing the number of trees that we have to clear to make the trails passable just wouldn't be possible without the volunteer help assisting our director of operations and our maintenance crew. So lots of stuff going on in the orchard. Meg brought up the most recent acquisition of the state park, and we've been investing a lot in stabilizing that historic orchard. And this past year, with the support of state parks, we set up a green cycle program, setting up composting. So when there are downed trees or woody debris, we don't have to pay to take that off site. We can actually take it down to this orchard site and do some composting. And it just makes a ton of sense from an efficiency perspective. And then we can use that to help feed our gardens, feed the orchard, and so many other great uses for that. Through a couple of really terrific donations from our board, we were able to purchase a lot of heavy equipment, a chipper, a tractor that's really making a lot of this work in stabilizing the orchard possible. And then many of you may know that, that our park was part of this larger Sonoma Valley Wildlands collaborative. And in 2019, received a CAL FIRE grant to do some fuel management work. There was some thinning of eucalyptus here in the park. If you pull up next to our kiosk here, you can see a really transformational, from a visual perspective, really transformational there, helping to manage fuel here in the park. And so that was all done possible through that CAL FIRE grant, potentially more of that to come. That is now officially been signed off and wrapped up in terms of the work that was funded here at Jack London. Got some neat things. We do some biological monitoring every year. We do know that we've got at least a roosting pair of northern spotted owl here in one of our canyons. Can't disclose where that is. We're working with Avocet. It's the only pair on Sonoma Mountain that they have been tracking. We think they might be nesting. Unfortunately, there's been an encroachment of barred owls. Barred owls are not great for northern spotted owls. They outcompete them. So we're really careful in nesting season around northern spotted owls. So we limit the kind of potential disruption. So we have these buffer zones that are established by Avocet. And again, just recognizing the real value of having this pair of spotted owls here. Very careful not to bring in heavy machinery or to do any kind of disruptive work that, that could cause some potential harm there. And then we mow early in the orchard to in advance of the nesting season here to not disrupt any bird nesting. My background, long ago and far away, I worked for what was then Point Reyes Bird Observatory. It's now Point Blue. And so I recognize the real value of birds. They tell us a lot. And I think that it's really important that the work that we do here is not disruptive to their habitat. So our crews here and our volunteers are especially sensitive to those things. And so we work with state protocols, but we go above and beyond that too, just to be sure that that we're doing all that we can not to be disruptive during nesting season. Of course, our whole organization is about partnerships. We work closely with state parks. We've got a camera array set up here with the Ottawa Canyon Ranch Living with Lions. Seen a lot of really wonderful pictures, images that these cameras have produced. We've seen some bears. Meg mentioned badgers. We've seen those too. We've seen a river otter on one of the cams, which was really exciting. And then this past year, you may have seen in the paper that we did a prescribed burn in partnership with state parks. This was not to manage fuels. This was a natural resource project, and it was a burn up at Mays Clearing. And if conditions allow, I think that state parks will continue to do this, really focusing on some grasslands and managing some invasives there. We had, one thing that I really like to note that I know a lot of our public spaces parks have experienced this year, and that's a lot more visitors. And of course, we encourage that, and we want to make this place accessible and available to everybody. It does mean that there can be a little bit more congestion in terms of cars coming here, and our parking lot has filled up. So I've been looking in ways that, both from an access perspective and then also an effort to reduce the number of cars coming into the park, to do some shuttle services, looking at some grant programs that will allow for getting people who wouldn't otherwise have access or car access to get to the park, making sure they have ways to get here to the park. But also, again, just sort of doing our best to reduce the traffic flow here in the valley. We've got, I mentioned the volunteer hours. When visitors are here, they have a really great experience. I think it's been our focus to ensure that that continues. And then lastly, I will open up to questions if anybody has any follow-up.
Cool. Do people have questions for Matt? Let's see. Should we have Matt put his presentation down so we can see faces? Thank you. I see that Teresa has a question. Teresa?
Thank you so much, Matt. Looking forward to meeting you. My question is, how many trees are actually left in the orchard? I work there, and since it's a historical kind of a environment, I wondered how many have been survived. And at one point, the Luther Burbank Society out in Sebastopol was doing some preservation work. Are they involved at all with that? And my third question is there any DNA work being done to see if these are actual Luther Burbank hybrid trees that Luther Burbank himself genetically put together?
Gosh, great questions. We've actually planted some more scions. And so there are some, we know that there is a 100-year-old cherry tree there that is, it's the last one. And we took some scions off that and we planted 17 more. So we're trying to maintain the historic footprint of the orchard. We haven't done, to my knowledge, there has not been any DNA work done, but what a great suggestion. I think we have been seeking expert help in managing the orchard and maintaining a lot of these historic trees. Our work with state parks mandates that we keep the what was there historically. So we're doing our best to stabilize it. But that would be really interesting to look at the DNA of these trees and try to understand where they came from. We know that they're about 100 years old.
You know, the Historical Society's had a link with a gentleman who is an arborist, and his father is, I guess, a historical arborist, and they were very interested in some of the trees on the valley floor campus of SDC as far as black walnut hybrids, and they're pretty kind of sure that those are Luther Burbank creations that are, you know, from the 20s in that area, or a little earlier than that. So it'd be curious to know if, since in 1918, 16, the executive director, Dr. Dawson, was a member of the Luther Burbank Society, you know, perhaps that orchard had some of his, you know, creations, his hybrids planted. So it'd be interesting to know, but I can connect with you later and another time about the name of the arborist, et cetera. So
yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Great questions, Teresa. It looks like Shannon. Go ahead and unmute, Shannon.
Hi, Matt. You might know my husband, Stephen Lee, who's part of the Ecology Center. I think you guys met. So we live right at the base of the Carolyn Day Trail. And you might know where I'm going with this. Yes. So there's been conversations over time of making sure that the maps keep people from getting lost. And oftentimes people end up at our back fence, which is fine, but we then drive them around back up to the park, because telling them how to get back from our house is really tricky. And so we know what they do. They come across, they go to the big tree, and they have this sense that they just need to keep going down instead of across, right? And so they end up down, 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 almost all the way back to Arnold Drive, which is, you know, we're just right above. So yeah, you know, I just wanted to remind you of that. Just a couple week ago, there was a whole family that ended up here, and I loaded them in my van and drove them back around, you know. So it's a common thing that happens. Locals know where they are, right? They get around, but of course it's people that are visiting the park and getting the map and then just getting confused, you know, as to where they are. So, well,
I saw Tracy is somewhere here too. Tracy has been involved in doing some mapping. I'll tell you, you know, there is another effort that we've been working on here in the park, and that's wayfinding signage. And I think that's a really important part of it. And we have, you know, we have a bunch of trails named after bridges. People are notoriously lost up there. New Fallen, Old Fallen, you know, who knows where they are. So we're working on that. I think we've looked at some models. I looked at this really great model out of Portugal, doing some color coding. You know, fortunately, I know the area really well. I'm out there running, and I'll come up into, you know, a fork in a trail, and I'll see one of our signs kind of, you know, very Bugs Bunny-esque, lying in the middle of the trail, and sort of, you know, which way do you go? And you know, and thankfully for some, they end up at your place, Shannon, and they have wonderful people that are going to help them get back where they need to be. But that's something that we're working on. I think it's really important. We've also noticed that a lot of people are coming in from Sonoma Mountain Regional, and the sign says, you know, it's however, you know, 4 miles or 2 miles to Jack London, and they think they're hiking down to Beauty Ranch, but that's only to our boundary. And so they hike all the way down to Beauty Ranch, and they realize they've gone about 8 miles, and that it's about a 16-mile round trip. And so there's a lot of work to be done in that area. So really, really good point. But thank you for all that you and Steve have done to getting people back on track.
Yeah, and you may have heard the story. We actually had a group that came all the way from the North Slope Trail all the way across and ended up at our place. And it was dark by the time they got here. They didn't have any idea where they were. So yeah.
No, I'm making light of it a little bit, but it can become a really serious issue, and people sort of lose their way. And we're working on that. And of course, you know, so many people now used to be kind of a small group of locals who would hike in SDC, and more people are discovering that, and seen a lot more mountain bike use. So there's just a lot going on there, and we've been paying attention to that.
Great question, Shannon. I see that Meg has her hand up, and I see that Tracy has turned her camera on. You'll let us know, Tracy, if you'd like to make any comments as well. Meg, what is your question? Ask to unmute. Go ahead and unmute.
Matt, when you were talking about the trees in the orchard, when I first started hiking in the orchard 15 years ago, I tasted some amazing heritage apples in particular up on the ridge, but they're also winter pears and just all kinds of stuff. And as a hiker, I would be really interested in having some kind of guide to where things are, or what, you know, their names or something. If I know that's one other thing to do, but I just wanted to mention it as a.
That's a great suggestion. We are actually working on doing some programming there and doing some more interpretation. By the way, right now, if you know where the pears are in the orchard, those are all in full bloom. It looks amazing. I was just there today, so cool. I would encourage all of you to get out there now. It doesn't get any better than it is right now.
Thanks.
Cool. It looks like we've got a few more questions. Rebecca will be next, and then Bean.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for your presentation. Matt, I was just curious. There's been rumors, or people have indicated to me, that there's a proposal to have overnight camping at Jack London State Park. I wanted to, if you could just comment on that, because the impact to Glen Ellen, if there is, after what just happened in 2017, I just want to know whether or not if that's true or not. Is that in the horizon?
I don't know. Well, it's been talked about. I can confirm that, and it would be at Camp Via, and so there's a lot of moving parts. I don't expect the question to come up anytime soon, but we would have to sort of let state parks take the lead on that. And then I think, because it's not been part of the park's general plan, the general plan would have to be updated. So there would be a lot of opportunity for public comment. And so there would be a process, and you know, it's not something that'll likely come online anytime soon. But if it happened anywhere, it would most likely be at that Camp Via site.
Cool. Thanks for that question, Rebecca. Bean, do you have a question? And then we'll go to Teresa after Bean.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Hey, I apologize for this. Your slide about the value of volunteers, the math is all wrong. so just take a look at that. I'm sure you'll see what it is and fix it.
Okay.
So my actual question is, since I don't know how this works, could you talk a little bit about your relationship with the Transcendence Theater? Is it a partnership? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How does it work?
Well, it's something that I've of course inherited as the executive director here at Jack London Park Partners. And it's a partnership that's been in place since the transfer of operation from state parks to our operation. Obviously, last year we did not have a season. I think that they're trying very hard to get a season, some part of a season for 2021. I don't know how viable that is. So I've connected with Brad, who's the executive director there. So most of what we've talked about has sort of been in theory. So I haven't had the experience of actually working with them. I can tell you this, that proceeds from the performances have amounted to about between 10 and 15% of our operating budget, which is pretty significant. So that partnership has been a real strong benefit to the park. We're currently in a contract with them. I think we're in year 2 of a 5-year contract. And I think it was the notion behind it, I think, is a really positive one. And that's that to program and bring some new audiences and bring financial support to the park. So I hope that helps to answer it. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience not having lived through a full season with them.
Thanks, Bean, for that question. Teresa, you had a question.
I just wanted to follow up. I don't think I got an answer. Is the Luther Burbank Society in Sebastopol involved in any orchard restoration? And then a follow-up question is, have you actually submitted a proposal to permit Sonoma for overnight camping at Camp Villa? Thank you.
We have, so no to both. And we don't have, we have a number of resources for the orchard, but I don't think that we've connected with the source you mentioned. Because we are partners with state parks would really have to take the lead on wanting the camping. So it is, way too soon for us to even have formed an opinion about whether our nonprofit has the capacity, interest, or ability to even operate a campground. So way too early for me to give you any kind of answer of any substance.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that question, Teresa. Do we have any other questions for Matt before we go on to our next presenter? I am not seeing any at the moment. Wow, thanks, Matt. I'm really looking forward to getting up to the orchard right now and seeing what that's looking like. Thanks for your great presentation. Thanks for all the work that you and Jacqueline and Park Partners are doing to maintain this wonderful location and resource that we all very much enjoy.
Thanks a lot, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys today.
You're very welcome. Thank you again. Okay, I will apologize to John McCall, our third presenter. We ran just a tiny bit long. John is the Land Acquisitions Director for Sonoma Land Trust. And John, what's going on with Sonoma Land Trust?
Hi, everybody. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good, thank you. No problem. Glen Ellen Forum is always a lively discussion, so it's good to see everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I actually don't want to talk that much about SDC tonight. I'm happy to in the Q&A. There are so many folks on the call tonight who are well versed, and I want to bring up and talk about some other work that the Land Trust is doing to protect land on the mountain. So sorry, Meg and Matt, you have to force me to talk about SDC tonight. So for those who may not know the Land Trust, I'm assuming most of you do, but we got our start here in the Sonoma Valley in the 1970s. Couldn't resist putting up a picture of Ann Teller and Otto Teller. The land conservation movement, really the creation of private nonprofit land trusts got started in the 70s. And we were at the beginning of that wave in California, thanks to Otto and Ann. I hope that feedback is not me. And some of our other key allies down in the South Bay and Marin were established a few years later. So that's our origin story, is in the valley, of course, looking up at the mountain. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I actually want to just quickly show you a property that we're just about to close on this month. If you're up on the Fitzsimmons property, as I was on Friday, you can look over and see Sonoma Mountain. So this is about vantage points. So this is a 200-acre addition to Hood Mountain Regional Park. We're closing with the family, a wonderful family. who's been cattle ranching there, light touch cattle ranching, since the early 1900s. This won't open up to visitors right away. It's part of the Bear Creek watershed, which flows into Sonoma Creek. So thanks to the Moore Foundation and private gifts, we were able to protect this property. So someday soon, you'll be able to appreciate more of the beauty that is this growing park across the valley, that's Sugarloaf and Hood Mountain. These are a couple pictures looking there. You can see Sonoma Mountain and the bay. Okay, so coming closer all the time here to Sonoma Mountain. This project is in the acquisition stage, and I manage our acquisition work. I'm sorry I skipped over that, but my job for the Land Trust is to manage our acquisition department. I've done most of my work on projects in the valley and on Sonoma Mountain since I joined the trust. For any of you who've driven over Bennett Valley Road, you come up out of Glen Ellen, you crest up over the hill, and everything just opens up. This is that property. You're coming up, you loop a creek canyon, and as the property actually starts as the road twists and winds up, you're heading towards Santa Rosa on Bennett Valley Road. So it's on both sides. If you know where the intersection of Enterprise and Bennett Valley is, it's that land right there. We are hopefully going to close the purchase next year, the year after. It's about $3.5 million. You can see it touches Trione Annandale State Park. This is part of the dream of connecting Annandale and North Slope, Jack London someday through the Bay Area Ridge Trail. Also extremely important for wildlife. Audubon Canyon Ranch shows lions all over this property all the time. Just so you understand this map, the brown shading is the wildlife corridor background, part of a regional network of wildlife corridors around the Bay Area. So that's what that brown shading is. You saw Meg, one of her slides showed that as well. So again, this is going into Sonoma County Regional Parks ownership. The Land Trust will hold it for a few years. Again, this isn't something that will be open to the public right away, but what is remarkable about this property is the vernal pools. The slide on the right doesn't do justice to them, but if you've seen vernal pools in the Laguna or other parts of California, these are up on the slopes. This is way up on the mountain, and you can see them if you're coming east on Bennett Valley Road, heading down towards Glen Ellen. You probably have seen one of the big pools off to your left. It's right off the road there. These are unique assemblages of plant species, unique geology. So that's what makes one of the things that makes this property so special. Going down to the southern tip of the mountain, we are working with the Felder family, that orange block down at the bottom, which is right off of Felder Road, off of Arnold Drive. This family has been ranching for 3 generations, 700 acres, just on the southern tip of the mountain there. It actually crests over, so you can see all the Petaluma side. It's got a big swath of Rogers Creek and Felder Creek. This is the previous property, the dinner property on Bennett Valley Road, is an acquisition. We're buying the land, we're transferring it to parks, we donate it to parks. We raise the money and donate the property to parks. This one is a conservation easement. It'll stay in private ownership. The family will be able to continue ranching and agriculture, but we will purchase off the rest of the development rights from the ranch, keep it wild, keep it free, keep it in agriculture. This map, also for those of you, this is more like a trivia question, but if you remember on Trinity Road and Highway 12, they did some widening or they put in a turn lane a couple years ago. Well, when that happens, Caltrans has a road mitigation fund. It's called the Environmental Enhancement Fund. And it has a couple $1 million a year to basically try to make up for impacts to habitat from highway projects. We have applied for funding for Felder Ranch from that fund, and we got funding for the dinner property, the one I was speaking about previously, from that fund as well. So this little tiny turn lane on Highway 12 has generated hopefully over $1.5 million in mitigation funds. The rest of the money will be coming from mostly the state's agricultural land easement programs. And this is a stretch of Rogers Creek, which runs up long. It's the biggest tributary of Sonoma Creek. And then this is a view looking up on the slopes of Felder Ranch, looking back towards Sonoma and down into the valley, looking north. Had to talk about SDC a little bit, but wrapping up, just so folks know, Meg talked about this. We worked with all of our local coalition, Glen Ellen Forum included, for years now on protecting the lands of SDC. And this also gets back to can't be as part of SDC. So nothing can happen out there until the land transfer hopefully occurs soon to the park agencies. So if anyone wants a copy of this, this is our proposal, not just the Land Trust, but Ecology Center and multiple county agencies, regional parks, Ag and Open Space District, to protect the lands of SDC. The legislation that passed in 2019 mandates that the open space lands outside of the core campus be protected. There's all kinds of wrinkles and challenges with that, but this is the map that's part of our proposal. This comes from the WRT study. And so this is real simple ABCs. We want everything that has an A on it or a B on it protected, either added to the regional park. The A running right through the campus is Sonoma Creek, so we got to protect the creek corridor. So we have a very specific proposal that the state has had for 2 years now. And once the plan for the campus is done, we absolutely at that same time have got to get this land, or sooner get this land transferred into the park. So anyway, that's, if folks want to know more specifically about what we're calling for on the SDC campus, that is it. And that was my last slide. Nick, you're muted. The master, the MC is muted.
Thanks, John. Do we have great presentation? Do we have questions for John? I see you laughing, Tracy. Questions for John and Sonoma Land Trust. Let's see. We see Rebecca has a question. Rebecca, would you like to unmute?
Thank you, Nick. And I'm sorry I'm asking all these questions, but this is super interesting to me. So thank you, John. I know that there's a lot of land being acquired and from open space, et cetera, or the land trust, and then it's all transferred to the regional parks. But the regional parks, do they have the resources to support all this? It's great stuff. But it seems like enforcement, management, operations, there may not be the resources or the funding for this. I'm just wondering if you guys look beyond that to make sure that there's support and enforcement versus just acquiring the land and then passing it off to regional parks and you wipe your hands, and we're keep moving on.
No,
Can you comment on that?
Certainly, and I appreciate that question. The best news for parks in the last couple of years is the passage of Measure M, which is the sales tax measure that many of us voted for. They finally have a baseline budget that allows them to deal with deferred maintenance, to deal with better enforcement, better signage, et cetera. I was just up in Hood Mountain, and the work that they're doing after the fires, after the glass fire, is amazing. They're using also insurance settlement money from the fires, but I didn't know that Sonoma County Parks would ever get to the point they're at now in terms of capacity and finances. So that's for some of the existing parks. For newer properties, like for instance, the one on Bennett Valley Road, we won't transfer it to them until it's very clear how that property is going to be managed and protected and that the neighbors' needs are met. So our approach is that we'll hold on to the property and we'll pay for stewardship and management until we're sure that the capacity is there. That's their request as well. So I hear you loud and clear. We can't just increase a burden without the budget and staffing to take care of it.
Thanks for that question, Rebecca. Do we have other questions for John while he's here? It looks like Tracy may have a question.
So John, I actually happen to know of a property up on the mountain that potentially could be of interest to the Land Trust. How does one get the attention of the Land Trust if one knows of a piece of property that might be of interest?
Well, I know that you have my contact information. Let me know, but let me know. And of course, sometimes the best thing always is that the landowner themselves contact us. But if it's please reach out. Let me know.
Wow, great question. Do we have other questions for John while he's here with us?
There's a question in the chat.
Okay. Would you like to read that?
It's from Dana. It says, what is the status of Cooper's Grove on Sonoma Mountain?
I don't know that. Do you, Meg or Matt?
What aspect of Cooper's Grove? I may be able to answer it.
I don't see that in the chat section beyond just that basic question. Maybe are we thinking of transferring it over time? Could that be part of the question?
Steve's telling me that it's part of ag and open space already. So maybe that's part of the answer. I don't know.
Yeah, cool.
So currently it was part of the proposal of North Sonoma Mountain Regional Park, but currently there won't be, as my understanding, and you'll have to confirm it with regional parks because I'm not a regional parks employee, but that due to the lack of access to Cooper's Grove, they cannot cross over the road from North Sonoma Mountain Regional Park to Cooper's Grove. And therefore access to Cooper's Grove will not take place at this time. And there will not be an allowed entrance from Sonoma Mountain Park into Cooper's Grove because there's no parking. That is my understanding.
Okay. Thank you for that, Rebecca. And thanks for that question. Do we have any other? Oh, yes. Kathy has a question. Kathy, go ahead and unmute. Thank you.
Yes, I'm new to the forum, so I'm so glad to be here, and I'm particularly enthused and excited about all these presentations this evening. Thank you all so much. For the Sonoma Land Trust, though, what are your most urgent priorities for the next couple of years? Just sort of a bigger picture. And then also, how has your funding and the donated and sort of the financial support been in this, particularly in this past pandemic year of 2020, and how are you doing on the finances?
Thank you, Kathy. We have a new executive director. I think that Matt Leffert and our new ED, Eamon O'Byrne, began close to the same time, which was late 2019. So Eamon comes from the Nature Conservancy and has brought a focus on climate change to the Land Trust in a way that we were always talking about it and thinking about it before, but he's bringing a urgency and kind of strategic focus. I think far and away our biggest priority is what's happening down in the Baylands with Highway 37, sea level rise, and the need to do large scale tidal marsh restoration along that whole corridor. So that's our biggest project in terms of staffing and resources. And then what we're going to be working on a lot more, expanding, is our work on the Russian River, focusing in on Coho and Steelhead, which are the streams that feed the Russian River that are most important to fish. How can we save species that are on the brink of extinction? So that's a kind of another big regional program. Thankfully, fundraising, we had to lay off a third of our staff a year ago. But then we ended up having a better financial year than we expected before COVID. So people stepped up and donated and gave in a way that was remarkable. And we're in a much better position than we thought we were going to be. So let's keep moving. It was a rough year, but it ended really well.
Great, that's good news. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Kathy. Do we have other questions for John while he's here with us? I am not seeing further questions at this. Oh yes, Meg has a question for John. Go ahead and unmute.
John, does the Land Trust have any plans for starting to lead hikes again?
We are waiting still. No, I wish. I mean, we literally, you know, just like you all, and
yeah,
and we have all our hikes in the can ready to go, but no, not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Do we have other questions for John at this time? I am not seeing any hands up. So I will thank you, John. Thank you so much. Terrific presentation. Thanks for joining us here at the forum.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And right now, I'm just going to thank all three guests again. Thank you, Meg, Matt, and John. You were fantastic, really fantastic. We like to do just